So I forgot to welcome you back for the second part. This is the third panel. It's about shipbreaking and ship recycling. We already saw the video, and the host will be Monique Giese again.
Thank you so much. So
Thank you.
I would like to ask my panelists to come on stage. We are going to have Henning Gramann. Henning, I would like to ask you to, well, just stay behind there. He's CEO of Green Ship Recycling Services GmbH. Then we have Yuvraj Thakur. Okay, good. From Verifavia Shipping. He's Marine Engineer, General Manager and Commercial Manager of the Asia Pacific. And last but not least, we have Christoph Brun. He's Managing Director of Brun Shipbrokers. So you can, we just take a seat on stage, and Henning will give us his 5-minute presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm always happy to speak about ship recycling and what we are doing. I hope we can keep you awake after the lunch break. This is the most challenging part of today, I guess. So let's see how well we can manage. I'm Henning Gramann. I'm an environmental engineer. I'm working since 18 years now in maritime environmental protection, and since 12 years I spend all my working time on ship recycling. I was part of the development team at IMO for developing the Hong Kong Convention. We did a lot of research and development at my time when I was at Germanischer Lloyd. I was head of a department over there and have built up the ship recycling department. And beginning of 2011, I started my own company, GSR Services, which stands for Green Ship Recycling Services. Since 2013, we are actively involved in the ship recycling industry in India. We have finished 30 projects for implementing the new standards according to Hong Kong Convention and EU ship recycling regulation in individual yards in India. I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm absolutely transparent, open to any question. For me, it's my dedication to improve the standards. And I'm not talking about the countries anymore. I talk about individual yards. Because you can have a perfect yard operating perfectly and where all the workers are properly trained, anybody is fully aware of the risks and dangers associated with this heavy industry, with ship recycling. But next door, you can have hell on earth. So it's not fair to talk about countries. It's only fair to talk about individual companies. I don't want to be put to jail because my neighbor is a thief. Quite simple as that. The short video we have seen is typical, and we can see these conditions still. It depends on the management decision of the ship recycling yard, but that depends on the normal market situation, supply and demand. If green recycling or good recycling is not demanded by the ship-owning industry, nobody is going to deliver that because huge investments are required, and you can, as a businessman, only do investments if you get a return of investment sooner or later. We have participated actively and guided the New Zealand Navy in a very exceptional case. They had an oil tanker which was no more IMO compliant because it was single-hulled. And they got in touch with me and asked me for advice, and we started, right from the start, we were involved in the recycling planning of this tanker, which means we prepared the inventory of hazardous materials. We developed decision criteria for selecting the right ship recycler. We developed the tender criteria. It was a public tender. It was absolutely transparent. We visited with the New Zealand Navy some yards which were shortlisted out of all the applicants. And we did the supervision of the ongoing recycling activity with full tracking. For this ship, we have achieved a recycling ratio of 98.8%. It was a 3,700-ton tanker, quite small, and only 44 tons went into the landfill. And everything was done according to the international requirements and the EU ship recycling regulation. And what we have installed during our supervision was a time-lapse camera. And just to keep it very brief, I would like to share this time-lapse video compressed to 42 seconds, how a ship disappears in India. What you can see, no drop is falling into the sea, hardly any worker in the crane movement area. We have rising and falling tides, and the ship is pulled further and further onshore, and it's just like eaten up by small ants. Sometimes it's a little bit blurry. That's not for hiding anything. It's just because of monsoon season and the sea spray. So we had to clean the time-lapse camera from time to time. And you see in front they have a pier where the crane has good access to the ship. This yard handles ships of up to 20,000 tons. So not only 3,700, that was very small. And all the materials went into the processing, which means further up to the right into the cutting field, where everything was properly sorted. The ship, prior to cutting, was completely decontaminated by specialists, wearing full PPE according to European standards. And all the wastes which were generated during that process were properly disposed of, and we have achieved 100% tracking of all the materials coming from the ship into the yard and then leaving the yard. And what we are doing at the moment, this is the first ship ever which has been recycled in compliance with the so-called Basel Convention, transboundary movement of hazardous waste. That's the only existing legislation which we have now. Unfortunately, not the Hong Kong Convention, even though in the Deutscher Bundestag it has been debated yesterday, and it's likely that Germany will ratify it very soon, like Japan, India as well. But so far it has not entered into force, and from a legal point of view, therefore it does not exist, even it's out there and under processing. So that was fully legally compliant, under full supervision, and this is possible as well if the decision makers on the ship owning side want to do that. If not, if they only sell for top dollar, you will never be able to achieve that. If you try to pull out the last single dollar or cent from the ship recycler, he can't do that. He has more costs. That's my introduction.
Thank you, Henning. Reise nach Jerusalem. Okay, Jofraj, would you like to, well, you have a video and...
No, I have a very
Okay, yeah, then please go ahead with your presentation.
Sorry.
Yeah, please. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Yuvraj Thakur from Verify Shipping. I'm the commercial director and I come from India. So this is where all the ship recycling activities are happening. I'm a marine engineer, so I'm related to that. I have visited Alang, so I relate more to the video before this than this one. But let's see, the times are changing. At Verify Shipping, we work mostly in the carbon emission space, which comes under the environmental space. So we're the world's largest independent verifier of carbon emissions. We work with more than 200 clients and around 1,700 ships on EU MRV and IMO data collection system. I'm a hazmat expert as well, so we have started working on IHM projects. So this is what brings me here. Some expertise on IHM, what we have done, a few projects that we have done. This is what we are going to talk about on the panel today. So I have to keep this introduction very short. So these are the services that we offer. We are a UMRV emission report verifier and monitoring plan assessor. We do inventory of hazardous material preparation on behalf of the ship owners. We certify a lot of EU MRV IT systems. So we certify close to 20-25 IT systems. We do IMO DCS verification, Clean Cargo Working Group, and CSI, which is the Clean Shipping Index verification. So like I said, we work in the shipping environmental space, not just ship recycling, but carbon emissions as well as the ship recycling and IHM space. Thank you. That's my introduction.
Thank you so much. Christoph, would you like to say some words?
Yes, I can just stay seated. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the... Is it on? Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Christoph Brun and I'm a local shipbroker doing sale and purchase, which includes also, or can include if you want to go into this field, the sales of ships for demolition as we called it earlier. Now it's called recycling, a little bit more politically correct I guess. And more modern. I'm doing this business now for over 30 years, and most of the time, starting in the late 80s, it started also with deals for demolition, at the time still in the port of Kaohsiung, which was the main port at the time, which was then closed for containerization. And then the business went into India, Pakistan, later on China, and also Turkey. So I'm on a sort of, not day-to-day, but very regular contact with the the recycling market. The players in that business. I'm trying to bring together the ship owners who want to sell the ships for recycling and the buyers who have been the shipyards in the early years from India, but I would say due to payment problems that they had because they were only offering letter of credit payments, which most of the European buyers were not really used to or wanted to. So we went into a phase of establishing certain, as we call it, cash buyers who have developed a product of taking this payment risk or problems away from the ship owners and stepped in between the shipyard and the ship owners. So actually the ship owner sold the ship to that cash buyer, and he then either back to back or on a speculative basis a bit later sold the ship onto the shipyard. So that's the I would say the short version of the part of the business I'm doing next to, of course, normal sale and purchase transaction with trading ships.
Thank you so much. So you just pointed something out, which is very important. So while in the past we spoke about demolition of vessels, today we speak about recycling. We're speaking about demolition where we have the countries that are very famous, well, like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Turkey, China. And it was not really, it was not recycling, it was just like beaching, so while crushing the vessel at the beach, and it was not really a yard, it was more or less a beach. Looking at the numbers, so 70 to 80% of the vessels were scrapped at only 3 beaches, which is, very shocking. And then we had the Hong Kong Convention, you mentioned that in 2009, and the EU regulation that came into effect in 2013. And I guess the key issue is the inventory of hazardous goods. That's what you just told us. So looking at that, has already something changed? Will something change? What will happen?
Well, partly quite a few things have changed, but it depends on the individuals. That's very clear. We cannot speak about the general ship recycling market or let's say the irresponsible or responsible behavior of owners. We are very familiar, anybody who's in the shipping industry, with the criticism on the so-called beaching method. I did a study with a colleague from the Netherlands in 2014, and we compared the different requirements as per the Hong Kong Convention and also as per EU ship recycling regulation with the methods applied. We distinguish between 4 different methods. That is the so-called beaching method, as done for roughly 80% of the ships which are recycled. We have the landing method as it is applied in Turkey, which is not different at all from beaching. It's just that the tidal range is much less. Then we have the alongside method applied in China, so meaning recycling alongside a pier with cranes. And we have theoretically, not in practice, the dry dock method. There is not a single dry dock at the moment which is really used for recycling. Not maybe the remaining canoe of the ship is brought on a slipway or in a dry dock for the final, very final cutting. But ship recycling means, as of today, any cutting is done either above or in the water. And what counts much more is what's happening inside the ship. The awareness of the workers, the coordination of the different tasks. And then beaching is only one aspect or one method how you get access to the ship. That's the only difference. So the NGO shipbreaking platform is hammering on the beaching method since many, many years and cries out, ban beaching. I substantially disagree because we cannot prejudge this method and saying you are burning cables to get the copper and that's associated with beaching. It has nothing to do with beaching. I can burn cables even in my backyard. Not that I'm doing it, but I could do it. So therefore, a proper technical judgment on the different methods and awareness and identification of risks and countermeasures widely has never been done, except of a few experts. So therefore, I personally disagree to this ban beaching campaign at all. And in public, the huge achievements which have been made in some yards. In India, we are working with 6 yards in Pakistan at the moment, and on Monday I got the first contract from Bangladesh. They are willing to look into it. Nevertheless, Pakistan and Bangladesh have a much less developed infrastructure. These projects will take longer than they take in India. So, but we have, as I said, we have finished 30 projects in India. We are working with 13 more yards in India. We have achieved a green capacity of roughly 120 to 140 ships per year. And they are crying out loud because they are not utilized. The ship owners, because they might ask for a marginal discount, and I talk about, let's say, $5 to $10 per ton for the additional and good services, which the ship owners are not willing to accept. Just to give you the price range, India at the moment is paying roughly $440 per ton of a ship's weight. Many ships which go for recycling weigh 10 or even 20 or 30,000 tons, multiplied by 440. And the owners are not willing to get a socially responsible and proper green recycling done for the price of $5 less.
So what's in comparison, what does Bangladesh pay? So like the beaching,
Well, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India are more or less on the same price range. In Turkey, which has a green image, which does also, from my point of view, not apply to all yards. Some yards are very good, others are not. They pay, I think, around 230 instead of 440, and China is even less than Turkey at the moment. Plus, China, the government has decided to pull out of ship recycling by the end of this year. So the whole capacity which is there will not be available after the end of this year. And that's probably, we'll talk about it, the EU capacity maybe a bit later on.
I will get back to that later, but maybe you can, because we discussed that India is doing a lot, where especially the government just investing and they want to comply with the EU regulations, and they are looking for investors and to get the yards to a very, very good standard, so that we can speak about real green shipping.
Yes, I'll give you example of another regulation in which we are working. So who are we? We are an independent verifier of carbon emissions. My question is that who independently verifies these yards, whether they are doing the correct job or not? Then my second question is, what about the damage that has already been done? You do not just stop today. What happened to the father goes down 20 to 30 years down the line to his son, to his grandson. If the father has had asbestos exposure in India, he'll have cancer. His next generations will have cancer. Does the yard take care of their workers? They just say that, okay, now we are complying. We have a consultant, we have a class checking it, and that's it. But what about an independent verification? What about an independent check? And then what about their future generations? Who is investing? Okay, people are investing in yards, ship owners are getting their money, but who is investing in people? We see these videos, these were about people. Who is investing in that? These questions are unanswered for me so far.
Christoph, anything to add?
Well, there's not very much I can add coming from my side, but certainly I think as we see it, the problem is it's a two-tier problem. We have the first step is how do we make the owners, how do we encourage the owners to decide for green recycling? And the other point is how do the yards comply with it, which includes, of course, the human aspect, which I think could probably then only be a next step, because I mean, if they improve their yard facilities in order to stay competitive, because I think in the long run this will be their challenge and their task, then the conditions improve. Of course, you're correct. What happens with the old workers, so I think it's these two things which we have to separate a little bit, which in a way work together, and someone has to give the other side incentive, do more green recycling. So far it's a pure, in my view, a pure commercial matter that the owners, as you say, look for the price, and if they don't have any sort of social responsibility or moral responsibility, or which they may use in the sort of marketing their brand, take Maersk for example, then they will try to find their way to the best price, which so far, because of the investments these yards have to make and the process is more expensive, is different. And as long as that is the case, they will go for the higher prices. So this is one thing. And then, of course, the yards, once the ship arrives there, we go into another responsibility and caretaking process.
So I would like to come back to this EU regulation where the main point is this inventory of hazardous materials. So I am really wondering, so looking at the market situation, but we will come back to that. Is there, so we have like for new vessels, we have to have this inventory. For the other vessels that are just, crisscrossing the ocean, they have to have it until 20, so end of 2020. So in between, what happens? So can we really speak about green recycling when we just have like this inventory? So what does it tell us? So it's just, we have a list, but in the end you do not know what the yard is doing with all the materials. So when we speak about recycling, it's just to use something again, and not really like, I have a inventory of materials, so what to do with it? And again, is there a chance still to avoid that?
Well, first of all, I have to say that most of the ships which are sent for recycling don't have an IHM at all. When we talk about costs and prices, the price for an IHM for a normal cargo ship is between 9,000 and 14,000 euros. That's nothing compared to the millions they get for selling their recycling ships. We had to overcome quite a few challenges for developing these yards. We have and we are still working with. We said either the ship comes with an IHM or you get an IHM prepared by an expert, even after beaching up the ship. Because if you don't know where the hazardous materials are, you can't recycle the ship in a safe or environmentally sound manner. That's impossible. The IHM is a key requirement. I personally have developed roughly 70 IHMs, and this should be done, or according to Hong Kong Convention and EU ship recycling regulation, it's under the responsibility of the owner.
Yeah.
The EU ship recycling regulation addresses all EU flagged ships and all ships visiting an EU port. With the deadline end of 2020, it means roughly 30 up to 40,000 ships have to get an inventory of hazardous materials being prepared and certified. I would estimate as of today, maybe 1,000, 1,500 IHMs have been prepared. That still leaves roughly 30,000 ships easily, which are not prepared. I was invited by EMSA, the European Maritime Safety Agency, to Lisbon to give them a feedback from the market. And I explained to them that half of the fleet, which is addressed under the EU ship recycling regulation, will not be able to get an IHM in time. Even though this regulation has entered into force end of 2013, giving the industry 7 years, nothing has happened. And I asked the responsible guys in Brussels from the European Commission if they plan to extend this deadline. And they clearly said no. The industry had 7 years for getting prepared. If the industry is not managing to get prepared within 7 years, they have to feel the penalties.
Yeah.
So this is a huge issue which is coming up. At the moment, we have received requests for roughly 1,000 IHMs from German owners. My company is small. We can't handle 1,000 until end of 2020. And the experts which are required to prepare good quality IHMs are not there. There are only few companies who provide sufficient services and which have a proper understanding of the IHM guidelines. We see more and more popping up. Completely unexperienced guys which come with a plastic bag and a few tools on board the ship, take 20 samples and say, now you have an inventory. We never leave a ship with less than 80 samples, and we know exactly of which materials we have to take them. Because if we are not doing a proper job, the IHM has a status of a technical file, has to be prepared under the responsibility of the owner. If he sells a ship with an inappropriate IHM, he will run into big trouble. So what seems for some ship owners in the beginning to get a bargain, to get a very cheap IHM, and they just want to have the paper, they are not aware that a set of technical documentation is prepared. And if this is inaccurate, the new owner, the buyer, will go back to the seller and they will have a fundamental argument, which might go deep into the pockets.
Can I ask a question? Who controls the quality of that certificate?
Exactly.
I mean, is there is it a class? Is it the flag state?
The problem we have at the moment, usually the classification societies should do it, or what we call in the legal text the recognized organization, not necessarily classification societies, but in practice they are the guys who do it. What we see, and I have developed the IHM guidelines for IMO together with colleagues from Japan. That was back in 2006, 2007. I have established the IHMA, the International Hazmat Association, as a brand mark, and we do auditing within our members that good IHMs are prepared to distinguish ourselves from what I call the cheap guys, low quality, low cost, just get it done. What I've experienced is that even the classification societies, including the Ajax associations, so the top guys of the industry, some of them are not aware of it or have a completely wrong understanding. My company has been approved by some classification societies. We had auditors in our office where I gave them a 2-hour lecture about an IHM, what it is, how it is prepared, and they said, after the audit, thank you, I've learned a lot. So many of them are doing some misinterpretations, fundamental misinterpretations of the guidelines, and they just stamp the reports which have been prepared by whoever and enjoy the additional business. But it's no added value as of today. And if the problem, what I generally see, my background is also from a classification society. To be honest, I left the classification industry because what I detected was the annual turnover is more important than securing the quality. And that was not according to my working attitude.
Maybe to, well, then I take this point again, and then we come to the current market situation and the development in the ship demolition industry. So when you say, yeah, you can have like this inventory, but then if I have a EU-flagged vessel or a vessel that is serving European ports, then as a ship owner, I can easily just sell the vessel on high sea, change flag, and well, do not go via a European port, and then I do not need to comply with the regulations. So is that possible, or is that not possible? I don't want to give any advice on avoidance, but
I don't think for 8 to 10,000 euros for preparing an IHM, they would lose trade. Trade is much more important than complying. They're already complying with so many different regulations. They should see this as another very, very important regulation. How importantly they see their NOx and SOx and cylinders and engines and deck files and IAPP certificates. They should see that similarly important, and I don't think they will have any problem once they realize that this is as important and they're doing something for the environment. And the agencies are the ones who would enforce this on top of them, and I think EU is doing their job well so far.
Yeah.
I love your optimism towards the ship owners. As I can see it, I think there are not so many ship owners around, so you can talk a little bit openly.
But there's a camera, just
there's a camera.
just to let you know.
No, but I think it sounds a little bit like an ideal world. I agree with you. They have a lot of regulations to take care of, especially in the next couple of years with emissions and fuel quality and all these things. Engine, we have the big exhibition at the moment where these topics are on top end. And this is in order to maintain trading the ships and earning for what they were built for. When it comes to finishing the life of a ship, it seems like the attitude of the owners is a bit different. And I think that's the point where companies like the NGO Shipbreaking and the media have a chance to make everyone aware of it, so that the pressure on the owners, together with necessary regulations, without saying no one will change anything, brings them into the sort of responsibility thinking. Like in all other factors, whether it's cars or clothes or so on, we have the same problems, I think, in many sectors. And I think that's on this side, from the owner side, this is the challenge. How do we motivate and encourage them to go more into this, so that the yards have more money to invest into this improvement of their facility, and so the process continues. But knowing shipping, I think it takes long time.
Just the second, Roland.
Yeah, I just have a few questions from the audience. You want to say something first?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
go.
I would like to agree to both the panel speakers as well. What I would like to add, yes, IHMs will be done for keeping trading with the European region, because it's a huge market and it's important for the global shipping industry. Yes, I fully agree that the attitude of owners changes when it comes to end-of-life ships. They have nice corporate social responsibility policies. As soon as they want to sell a ship, it's gone.
Yeah.
They don't see that they are responsible for what's going to happen with the ship. Circumventing the EU ship recycling regulation, which limits EU-flagged ships to EU-listed facilities only, is very simple. Change of flag.
Yeah.
At the moment, what we have on the EU list are, when we only have a look at the active yards, they are more listed, but they are not practicing ship recycling. The maximum length of a ship which you can get recycled in an EU yard is 194 meters. Show me the major trading ships below 194 meters. They are not there. They have to flag out. There is no capacity. This is what I meant with China. The EU was hoping for that, because if they can approve these yards from China, they would get rid of the size limitation and they would have a big capacity. As the EU, Chinese government said, we stop ship recycling at the end of 2018, this is gone. And the EU in Brussels has a huge capacity problem if they really want to make their EU ship recycling regulation enforceable and bring it into life. At the moment, this is impossible.
May I just, before you raise your question, just one last point to discuss. So, because looking at the market situation, so we have, overcapacity. So we have, old ships. We have new regulations on emissions, which we will be discussing later. So there will be an increase in scrapping, I think. So, and the question is, so while looking at the, next 5 years, there's another issue, cruise vessels. They will also come, and they are, even longer than 190 meters. So there will be an issue looking at the market, and owners, they try to get rid of their vessels because of this overcapacity and the cost pressure and so on, which is, at the same time there.
Fully agree. What we need is let's say the public pressure, especially with the cruise industry. They're exposed to the public. They face a lot of criticism because of emissions, for instance. During the second last visit in India, I saw the Saga Rose. Saga Rose was from Saga Shipping, a cruise vessel. Saga Rose was dismantled in China a few years back with a nightmare on board because the green recycler, was not able to identify the most simple hazardous materials. Anyway, this is something I think which can be influenced easier, the cruise ships, and they generate a lot of waste.
Yeah.
They are not easy to be taken apart. Much easier are cargo vessels with a lot of huge open space inside. The NGO shipbreaking platform should work exactly on that. Expose the owners and expose the decision makers. In Germany we have the KG shipping. Most what we believe are owners are managers. They are not owners.
Exactly.
They are not decision makers.
Yeah.
So which means we talk about NordLB, we talk about former HSH Nordbank, we talk about also Commerzbank and other ship financing banks. And these 4 managers are far away from the shipping industry, and the investors, lawyers, dentists, whoever they might be, they are only interested in getting their money back and even a nice plus on top of that. There are, due to the shipping crisis, quite a few retired persons who lost their money which they planned for their retirement because of the shipping crisis, because there were more and more funds being put up on the market with glorious expectations, and they failed because one KG ship was the security for the other one. If one went bankrupt, we had a domino effect.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is a huge issue where basically the banks are to be blamed for, and the responsible ministers in the northern parts of Germany as well.
Yeah, but also the owners, because there was a prospectus, that promised all the profits. But yeah, I agree with you at a certain extent. But it's a question of responsibility. Yeah, who has to take over the responsibility? But this KG market, they will come on top because, for me, they're like a reason for the overcapacity.
Yes.
Silence. That is the moment where you didn't.
Let's have a few questions from the audience. For example, is there a way to crowdfund the recycling business and make it profitable so that locals can invest together with European consumers?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yep.
How is India going to do that? So, as I know, I have a colleague, he's global head of ports in India, and he is advising the ministry also on, the government on ship recycling. So how is India working on investors? So maybe to start with this first before we come to the crowdfunding.
I think more than the, even Mr. Graham is working with the Ministry of Environment in India. But I think more than the economic side, first they have to be raised socially. So because, like I said, the generations are now of these yard workers. They have all, seen their parents, their grandparents working in the yards, and they are suffering. So first, for me, has to be a social impact. You need to go, you need to educate, you need to tell them about what actual safety is. Wearing a helmet and a gloves is not actual safety. How much exposure is necessary? How would you save yourself so that you don't go the same lane what your father or your grandfather has gone into? And yes, I think right now there's foreign money coming into India. The Indian investors are also, I think, more than ready than what 2 decades ago when you guys started out. They are more than ready to invest and reinvest in their business, and for the European Commission to come, see, check themselves, and go to the best standards possible that are required for the ship breaking and recycling.
Sorry for being so talkative. It's India has a population of 1.2, 1.3 billion, huge social problems, and we can't compare it with what we believe is normal over here in the Western countries. They have completely different problems. Of course, what we are doing is we implement the way of thinking in the ship recycling yards, what we believe is good or is bad. But we cooperate with them. We are not going there as like knights and saying, good, bad, do it this way. No, they have the practical experience. We know some management aspects. We know the legal requirements, and this is how we can help them and guide them. Many of the ship recyclers are doing extremely well. They don't need foreign money. Not at all. Others, to be honest, are not doing so well. But if they identify this green market as the new niche market to grow in future, and they're not thinking only from one ship to the other, which many do. The business culture in India is like, I think about next week. That's it. If I come around the corner and tell him about a return of investment within 2 years or 5 ships to be recycled, they say, I don't care. The culture is different, and this is what we have to understand. And only a few, or let's say half of the ship recyclers from Alang, when we talk about Alang, have realized that they have to think about the long term, not from today till tomorrow. And then the whole picture changes, and they take care of the workers. They have a health insurance. They have substantial training. We have developed a training catalog with 12 different trainings for the different types of workers. I was participating in the IMO SenseFrac project for capacity building in Bangladesh, where we identified the training needs, where we developed the training contents. We gave the first the trainer seminars. So with training, a lot of things can be done. Of course, the PPE is a constant cost factor for the recyclers. More disposal, because the hazardous materials are identified, have to be disposed of properly. These are all costs which are adding up, and this is what basically the seller in the end has to pay. We brought Maersk to India. We showed them the good yards, and they said we would have never changed from China or Turkey to India if we would have not found at least comparable standards. They admitted, with the help of Lloyd's Register as independent verifier, the standards in India, including hinterland waste management, are at least on the same level or even better than what they have in China and Turkey.
But it's because, and to answer the question, I think while crowdfunding for supporting the yards, I guess that is not where the problem starts. So you need the awareness at the level of the ship owners, and this is something you need to work on first, and then you can work on the yards. That is just my opinion, because while you can have so much green yards as you like to, but in the end, if no one sends the vessels there for scrapping, that...
It comes down to public pressure. More than 90% of all the goods are traded internationally and transported by ships. We are wearing the jeans. Having a transparent market and saying who has transported it, what are they doing?
Exactly.
Exposing them. This is the role which I see for the NGO shipbreaking platform, investigating exactly that, instead of negating the huge improvements we have achieved in India. They still don't recognize it, not in public. They keep the old pictures, 10 years, 20 years old, up in the public media to simply destroy the image of India, even though there are yards which really have come a very, very long way.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to end this panel now with one or two questions from the audience. May I have this, please? Are there any questions? There's one in the back, yes.
So what can we do in the hackathon?
Yes, Carsten.
Yes, that's exactly my question, and I also have a comment, or another question. So my question would be also, what do you think about these NGOs like Shipbreaking platform? By the way, I have invited them, but they told me it's too far for them to travel here. Do you think these people have an impact on the issue? And then my last one would be idea for a hackathon.
We would not talk about ship recycling if we wouldn't have had or still have the NGO shipbreaking platform. They have achieved a lot, yes. But how they, at the moment I see them more focusing to maintain their campaign and raising funds for getting paid on a monthly basis than really helping the industry and guiding them. There is no technical guidance coming from them, only general criticism, which if you talk to them can easily be proven to be wrong. Hackathon, I think, spread the good word all over, make all the mailboxes full, and tell the world what has been achieved, and name the good guys who have done their homework. And my personal impression is many recyclers have done much more for green ship recycling than the owners, which come maybe right from next door.
Christoph?
No, I just wanted to add, don't forget NGO shipbreaking is also heavily financed by the EU. So I think the way that they are communicating the problems is also very important, should be in a more moderate and more productive way maybe. But as an institution and as a media to make these things aware to the public, I think certainly very good idea, but it has to go on.
Mm-hmm. All right, so then I would like to thank you very much. That was very interesting. And yeah, so I will just hand over to you then.
Yes, thank you very much.